Hello everyone and welcome to Joke of All Trades. Hope you've had a great week. Today we have some bonus content to deliver to you. We're going to start doing interviews with celebrities and people who are just kind of kicking butt at their trades. So today we are thrilled to announce we have Tom Thakkar, comedian who's recently featured on Conan, on the podcast. So I connected with him and asked him a little bit about his career in comedy. Enjoy. We have an extremely talented, very funny guy here on the podcast. Really thrilled to welcome Tom Thakkar.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. Here's a little background. So Tom Thakkar, formerly Tom Brady, he's a comic living in Brooklyn by the way of Chicago and his hometown of Bloomington, Indiana. Tom's kooky comedy has been featured on Conan, the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal, Bridgetown Comedy Festival, and he tours the country with another very funny comedian, Nikki Glaser. Tom is a regular on Doug Loves Movies podcast, and he has his own podcast as well called Stand By Your Band, where comedians come on the podcast to defend music they love that society makes fun of. It's hilarious stuff. You guys should check that out. Tom, welcome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's weird to hear that out loud.
Awesome. So real quick, just to give you guys a little taste of Tom's comedy. He was just recently featured on Conan. He was stand-up on the show. So I'm going to play a little bit from that.
I've been only flying on Spirit Airlines this year. It's like, oh yeah, everybody hates Spirit. I love it. It's like Medicaid for the sky, you know? It's sick. I flew on Spirit the other day for $34. Isn't that crazy? Nobody can beat 34, right? 34 is so cheap that even if it crashed, it's like still kind of a good deal. You know? I couldn't complain about it. Like, as it's going down, I'd be like, yeah, what did I think was going to happen? It should crash for sure. I spent $34 to fly in the air. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I wanted to tip the pilot, you know? Like, hey, they taking care of you, big guy? Are you an Uber pilot? Why is this so cheap?
So Tom, hilarious stuff. Real quick, speaking of flying and moving, you recently moved from Chicago to New York. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's been about 2.5 years now.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'm curious, just for our listeners, what, kind of motivated you to make that move? And then on top of that, what are some of the kind of differences you feel between the comedy scenes in New York and Chicago, if any?
Well, my goal was always to end up in New York. And I was in Chicago for 2 years from Bloomington. And I did Montreal, the comedy festival there. And it was kind of after that, I was like, I should get to New York. A lot of the industry there will tell you, we can't really do anything for you while you're in Chicago, but once you get to New York, hit us up. And then, so it just felt like a natural move. But I had planned to spend 2 to 3 years in Chicago. So then at that 2-year mark, I was like, the timing seems right. And then, it's a lot different. New York is so big. It can be super overwhelming when you get there, because Chicago is great because it's a big scene, but it doesn't feel so big. There's a couple different scenes in Chicago, but in New York, there's so many different scenes that you really can't touch them all. For example, in New York, there are places in Brooklyn that it would take me an hour to get to while I'm in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Whereas in Chicago, there's nowhere that I would go that would take me more than 30 or 40 minutes to get to.
Interesting.
So you can spend 2 hours traveling just to get somewhere else in New York. Yeah. So it's just big. And then as far as the scene goes, it's there's similarities in that Brooklyn kind of has a hipstery scene, younger, more, people say alt comedy, but I think it's just not comedy clubs. They don't have comedy clubs in Brooklyn, so it's just a different vibe a little bit. But that's kind of true for Logan Square in Chicago too. So Brooklyn's just a giant Logan Square, it feels like.
Interesting. What do you mean by, if you could describe alt comedy, what that is to you?
I think it just means non-tour, people aren't dealing with a drink minimum, so the expectations are a little different. They kind of, people are maybe a little more personal. That's not even always the case though. It can be a little bit headier. Sometimes in clubs, especially in New York, you're dealing with a lot of tourists who don't really want to see someone screw around or anything. They just want to hear the comedy that they've seen on TV. But Yeah, it's kind of difficult because I don't really believe in the idea of alt com. Like, I don't think it's. I think that alt comedy can work in a club too, so it doesn't really make sense. I think the way we know the term alt comedy doesn't. I think people just say it as a blanket term for something that it doesn't really mean. So it's kind of hard to explain because I don't really think it's a thing, but it's just a different kind of comedy from like what you've seen on TV, kind of like as the generic comedy club thing, which I don't think is really fair to comedy club comedy either, because I don't think that that's what people think it is either. I don't think it's all like this hacky, like airplane food sort of shit. Like I think that there's some of the best comedy being done is done in comedy clubs, and some of the best comedy being done is done in bars in Brooklyn. Like it can all be good.
Awesome. Thanks. So if you can kind of go into like just your background a little bit, everybody asks, what, like, who are your influences and stuff? And I think that's all been done before, but what is something that's been an influence to you that people might not necessarily expect, whether it's an artist or TV show or something that you just really enjoyed?
That's interesting. I really loved, I love Rory Scovel. He's one of my favorite comics now. Norm Macdonald's great.
Awesome.
But they're just people who I enjoy. So it's hard to tell if it's an influence as much as just something I like watching.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to say. When I was a kid, I was like obsessed with Will Ferrell, and I think that like when I started comedy, that kind of influenced how I would try to perform. Yeah, I've always liked really caricature-y people.
Awesome, thanks. So you recently performed on Conan, which is fantastic. Just played a little bit of that bit, and before I ask this question, I'm gonna play another bit from your Conan segment.
I live in Brooklyn now, which is fun, except for I get heckled on the street all the time, so I'm like ethnically ambiguous. Like I was sitting in the park the other day trying to meditate, and this guy yelled at me, "Go back to Guatemala!" He said Guatemala! That's so specific, man! That's like a racist Hail Mary to throw, you know? Because if that lands, that dude's going back to Guatemala tonight. It's over for that dude. I'm not from the beautiful land of Guatemala. I'm half Indian, in case you're trying to guess. Yeah, half Indian. Sometimes when I tell people that, they'll say this fun thing where they're like, "Oh, you're Indian, huh? Feather or dot?" Yeah, feather or dot. What a fun, flirty way to marginalize two cultures with two words. How efficient. I'm gonna start doing that to white people. Yeah, next time I see a white person, I'll be like, "Oh, you're white, huh? Potato or Nazi?" Yeah, they like it. Yeah.
I love this bit because it's so subtle, and it's like calling people out for trying to make race like this cute kind of game. So I'm curious, what was it like for you performing on Conan, and did it differ at all, in your mind or your expectations from just any one of your other shows?
It was definitely different from a normal show. One, they tape at 4 p.m., so you get there like 2:30, so it feels very different automatically from that.
Oh wow!
Also, I don't usually wear like a suit on stage, so that was weird. But
is it like a dress code?
Yeah, it was. No. It just felt appropriate.
Oh.
Like it seemed like, and I had the suit with me, so I was like, oh, I might as well, because I found out about Conan like less than 24 hours in advance, so I didn't have a ton of time to really think too much about it. I already had the material prepared because I had sent in the tape like 6 months before.
So were you in New York at the time when you found out?
No, I was in LA. I was there for this NBC stand-up competition thing that was like it's their like stand-up program that's really cool, but they flew us out for that and gave us like a clothing budget, which was sick because that's why I happened to have the suit. But yeah, because I was out there, they had a dropout on Conan the day before, or the day that I did it, and then they posited it as like a possibility. They were like, if you could do this, or if we wanted you to do this, would you be able to? And I had to like check with the NBC people and stuff.
Huh.
And then luckily it worked out, and like it was a mad dash to like I got to run the set once before I did it. But But besides that, it was actually way more relaxing. Than it wasn't as stressful as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a little more hectic. It was kind of just I played video games in the green room and like just tried to hang out and not like overthink it.
Very cool. That's awesome. Next question. So, what is your favorite one-hit wonder of all time?
Favorite one-hit wonder of all time? That's a good question. I have to think about that for a second.
Sure thing.
Because I'm sure there's a lot. I really like this song. What's that? No Letting Go from I think it's Wayne Wonder.
Huh. I don't know that one. I need to look that up.
Yeah, it's let me see here. I'm looking it up to make sure that's what it's called. Yeah, that's right. It's fun. It's like it's a banger for sure.
Nice. We recently asked
I think you would know it if you heard it.
Okay, I'll check that out. Because we recently asked this question on the podcast, and our different answers were. Mine was you Get What You Give by the New Radicals.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Other ones were Baha Men Who Let the Dogs Out, but then upon further digging, we found out that is actually a pretty sexist song, and so we took that back. Did you know that?
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. What are the sexist lines?
Well, hold on, let me look it up. It's like it's basically the gist of it. I'm looking it up right now.
Is the idea that the women are the dogs?
Oh yeah. It's like the party was fun, the party was bumping, but then like these ugly women came in, and then it was like who let the dogs out?
Yeah.
Like that's terrible.
That's so funny. I had no idea that's what it meant. Somehow I've not realized that this whole time.
Yeah. I feel pretty bad about that.
I legitimately thought that was about literal dogs.
Okay, so next up. So speaking of hits, you have this hilarious podcast. It's called Stand By Your Band. So basically the gist of the podcast, do you want to explain it? It's like people come on and try to defend, bands that might not be super popular or people might hate.
Yeah, we try to go with bands that people hate, but it's tricky because a lot of bands people are just indifferent to, or they just discount. But the idea of the podcast is it's bands that people like make fun of, like Coldplay. Like we think that we want to give people a chance to like make us listen to it earnestly and like give it a real chance before we make fun of it. But it's mostly an opportunity for us to make fun of music that that sucks. It's kind of a Trojan horse thing where we get people in and then we usually end up making fun of whatever. Like we did Justin Bieber yesterday, nice. And it ended up we just talked about all the messed up things he's done for half the episode. But it is fun because we test out the music and like it's fun because I like for it to be an experience where even if you don't care about the band or like it, you can still enjoy our banter about it. But people listen to it for different reasons. Some people listen to it just for the band and then they get mad that we talk too much. And then some people listen to it just for us and then they get mad when we talk about the bands too much. So it's hard to please people with this podcast, but yeah, it's a good time.
You guys do bring up some interesting points. I was listening the other day to your episode on the Killers, which I think perfectly describes a band that, extremely popular. I didn't even know that it was polarizing until I listened to the episode. But then
same here. I had the guest had to fight for that one, and then I did a little research. I was like, oh, people really hate them.
Yeah. I was shocked. I was shocked by that, especially someone brought up the point on your podcast that their lyrics at times are can just be garbage. Like the Killers are one of my favorite bands personally, but the song "Human" they personally called out.
I hate that song.
The chorus, "Are we human or are we dancers?"
Yeah, that one's brutal.
And it doesn't even sound like it sounds like he's saying dancer, singular, right. Also.
Yes, that is what he's saying.
Right? It is?
It is exactly what he's saying. It's as if, it's like human is a race and dancer is a race.
Yeah, that's
so
not
are we
great.
Human or are we dancer?
Yeah.
It's not good.
So you guys definitely changed my mind a little bit on that. I mean, I still love the Killers, but
yeah, I mean, I like the Killers too. When we were done with that, almost every time we give the playlist a fair listen, and especially a band like the Killers, a band that has a lot of hits. Like it's not hard to sell us, or at least me, on them. Where I'm like, oh, okay, I forgot that I like this, or like, we listen to the playlist a few times before we start the podcast, and like sometimes I'll just be like, oh yeah, this is. I wasn't being fair to this. This is actually good.
Huh.
Like we did ABBA, which was we got a lot of shit for doing that because people do most people like ABBA or they're indifferent. And I just thought that they were a punchline band because they were like I assumed they were like disco-y, like something that they weren't, and then now I love them.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I got super into them just from the playlist.
Because I'm probably in your camp currently. I need to listen to that one because I think ABBA is just they're all like awful, like whitewashed disco, basically.
Yeah, if that's what I thought, and then when I listened to it, the playlist that Joe Quazala sent us, I was like, oh, this is great.
Huh. Interesting. Moving on. So, in the spirit of Christmas, what is your spirit animal? But the Christmas edition, it has to be one of Santa's reindeer, and why?
Oh man, I gotta go with let's see. There's Dancer, there's Blitzen. Maybe Dancer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Dancer.
Singular.
Yeah. I'm not human. I'm Dancer. That's
very nice.
I'm gonna go with that.
Awesome.
That's funny that's so specific.
So you tour with Nikki Glaser. Do you have a bizarre, funny story about something unusual that happened on the tour that you want to share with listeners?
Something just happened that was so weird. Where we usually stay in the same hotels. And
Okay.
I was walking down the hallway this was like a few weeks ago, and there was as I was walking down the hallway, this lady like opened a room or like her door really fast, and she was like, I could kind of tell she was naked, but I couldn't really I can only tell by how fast she slammed the door and like shrieked. But I had my headphones in, and I shrieked. I was like, ah! I made like a loud yelping noise, and then Nikki called me because we were gonna go over to the club, and she asked if I'd come like talk to her in her room because she was like something crazy just happened. And then I get over there, and she's like, "You're not gonna believe this. I was like trying to get something that was outside of my hotel door, and I forgot that I didn't even think about the fact that I was like almost completely naked and like tried to grab this thing, and then there was a small child like walking through the hall at the same time, and I scared him, and like I think he's probably like I think that they're like looking for me to like kick me out of the hotel for like exposing myself to a child. And I was like, Nikki, that was me. Like I didn't realize, like I didn't see anything. I didn't like see that I didn't see her at all. I didn't even realize it was her. But it was so funny that she kept describing it as she thought that she had scared this little boy and like exposed herself, and that she was going to like go to jail or something.
That is awesome that you both just didn't like. Was there like a thick haze in the hallway that obscured your guys' vision?
Yeah. It was a very smoky hallway.
Building was on fire.
It was just so fast, and it was like all in my peripheral, so I didn't really, so I didn't see like anything. It was crazy.
That's hysterical.
And she was panicking, so all she saw was like she heard me yell when the door shut. Yeah.
That's awesome. So one thing I want to call attention to here is I really love your jokes. You're not only a great great comic, but also a great storyteller. And my question for you is, when you are writing your bits, do you start out thinking I'm going to write a joke, or do you think more I'm going to write a story, or is it neither?
It's kind of neither. It's more like I kind of throw everything against the wall that I can. My process is kind of that I just go to open mics with nothing, and then think of stuff I walk there and I try to think of stuff on the way that might be interesting.
Oh wow.
Or fun. Sometimes I just have very stupid jokes that I try, and my goal when I write a really stupid joke is to fit it within something else where it makes sense. I've been doing a lot more stuff about my family, so a lot of that stuff feels like stories, but a lot of it's just me piecing together my joke, like taping together my jokes so that they fit together. Because it's very hard for me to think in terms of story. Like a lot of times I'll start with a joke that it's kind of a story, but it's only like 40 seconds, and then through taking it on the road and like just throwing it in the middle of my set, it'll expand because I'll try to perform it like the rest of my material, and it just turns into something longer. if that makes any sense.
That's really interesting.
But I almost never start with like, I'm going to write a joke today or I'm going to do a story. Like it's always just me racking my brain, kind of panicking right before an open mic.
That's interesting. That almost feels more like Tetris. Like the pieces just kind of come and you just kind of have to see where they fit in.
Absolutely. That's it. I mean, that's so many of my jokes are just things that happen to fit between two other jokes.
Very cool.
I had a friend who told me that that's how he writes. He just looks at the jokes he already has and then looks at like what would fit between. Like if he has like a bunch of material about dating and then he has some stuff about marriage, he's like, oh well, I could write something about divorce too. Like it's just what goes with this, and then he just starts writing about it.
Is it ever intimidating or scary to be walking to a comedy club and knowing that literally you don't have your set list planned? You're just kind of thinking of it on the way?
Well, with comedy clubs, it's a little different because I usually do that or an idea of a set. I might throw in like a couple new things depending on how I'm feeling. Like tonight, I have a set at Caroline's, and I'll probably throw like one new idea in somewhere. But I really only do it at open mics where I just have nothing. That's the nice thing about open mics is there's nobody. It's just comedians there, so there's no point really. Especially when you've been here for a couple of years, there's really no point in doing a bunch of old material. So it's like I use those as I'm literally going to say whatever I thought of in the last like 2 days.
Nice.
But comedy clubs there's a little more pressure. You're being paid usually, or if you're not, you're auditioning kind of to work at a club. So, and especially when I go on the road with Nikki, it's like I'll usually do 25 to 30 minutes. So I have a few minutes of wiggle room to try out material, but for the most part, I feel like I need to do what I was paid to do.
Okay. You know? Nice. So along those lines, for New York or Brooklyn comedy lovers, where can people find you perform?
I'm at Caroline's on Broadway a ton. Me and my podcast co-host have a monthly show at Caroline's called. We changed the name to Stand By Your Band Live, but the next one's I think December 21st at 9:30, and then the one after that is January 25th at 9:30. And besides that, I'm all over the place. There's not like a consistent spot like with Brooklyn shows. You're on kind of different shows every week, so it's a little tricky, but I usually post all my stuff on Facebook and Twitter.
So follow Tom on Twitter. His handle is Tom A. Thakkar for updates on where he'll be next. All right, well, thanks for joining us on Joke of All Trades. This has been fantastic.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, this has been fun.
Fantastic. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks a lot.